Good afternoon, people. I hope I'm audible, right? So, good afternoon, everyone. So, we will continue from where we have left. So, today I would be finishing attitude, that is persuasion topic. I will be starting with emotional intelligence. Tomorrow we will continue with emotional intelligence, and one last lecture would be required in which I will be discussing about determinants of ethics, dimensions of ethics, and essence of ethics. So in total, including today's lecture, 3 lectures are required. So today, tomorrow, and one more lecture that would be next week, right? So with this, ethics from my end will be over. Is that clear? So a very good afternoon to everyone. So let's very quickly start with what we have discussed in the previous class. We were basically discussing persuasion, right? And we talked about how persuasion is one of the type of social influence. We did discuss that how persuasion is a receiver centric exercise. So if I am trying to persuade you, but your attitude and behavior with respect to certain object, idea, event, person has not changed as it was intended by the change agent, then the persuasion as an exercise have failed. Is that very clear? We have talked about that how in order to bring about effective persuasion, the source agent has to overcome certain barriers. The barriers can be semantic barrier, it can be psychological barrier, it can be the physical barrier. However, out of the 3, if some barrier which is most difficult to change is the psychological barrier, that's more because it is emerging from the inadequacies which are existing in the personality of the change agent as well as the target group. Is that very clear? Okay. Then we did discuss about that there are certain elements and the steps involved in the process of persuasion. So if you remember the elements, it was the source, it was the message, it was the receiver and the channel through which the message is being conveyed, right? Then we talked about the 4 steps which are involved in the process of persuasion, to which you can remember it easily by mentioning it as ACRA. That is attention, comprehension, retention, and action. Is that very clear? So at the end of it, what matters is the action. If the action is not happening in the desired direction, then it is perceived that it has failed to bring about the persuasion. Just a sec, people. Guys, 1 second. Oh, again it started before 1. No, I think there's some issue with the watch. No, it didn't start. I have not started anything, Rimjim. I'm just revisiting what we have done in the previous class. Okay. So this is what we have discussed, right? So then we talked about there are 3 elements which are absolutely important. So one is source, other is the message, and third is the receiver. So with respect to source, I said that persuasion can be effective if your source possesses certain qualities. For example, the credibility, for example, the attractiveness, for example, the power, right? And with respect to credibility, we say it is related to the expertise that the individual has over the field in which the person is trying to persuade you, or the trustworthiness. Okay? It goes hand in hand, both trustworthiness as well as expertise. However, in case there is any bone of contention, it is the trustworthiness which prevails. Then we did discuss about that what is the benefit of a high credible source as compared to a low credible source. Then we also discussed that how the degree of acceptance of the persuasive message by the high credible source not always remains the same. Over the period of time, it can decline. So it is very important that even though you are a high credible source, you have to re-emphasize your credibility every now and then. So whether you make use of social media, whether you ensure walking the talk, or you are basically leading by example or from front, ensuring good governance, development, upliftment. So you have to do everything in your capacity to reinforce your credibility from time to time. Otherwise, over the period of time, the degree of acceptance of persuasive message can decline. However, no matter how much it declines, it can never come to the level of a low credible source. Is that very clear? In fact, the degree of acceptance of the persuasive message by the low credible source over a period of time can increase. And how it can increase? If they are trying to persuade you with respect to something which is totally against their fundamental interest. And I gave you the example also for that. So this much we have talked about. How credibility ensures conformity, how attractiveness ensures identification, and how power at max ensure compliance. So if your source has all the three characters, nothing better than that. However, if given a choice, we would prefer credibility over attractiveness and power. Is that very clear? Then we talked about the message. So the first thing that we discussed was the message discrepancy, in which we have talked about the concept of zone of acceptance, rejection, and indifference. We did discuss that how first we should look for those individuals whose zone of acceptance is wide. That's one thing. And once you have chosen such individual, now your target is to further expand their zone of acceptance. And how it can be done, we have discussed that much. Is that very clear? Then एक छोटा सा topic उठाया था in which I told you that the message should have emotional and factual appeal both. So if given a choice, it is the emotional appeal which works better. And in this context, we have also discussed Aristotle's perspective, who says that persuasion can be brought about through three modes: ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is the credibility of the speaker. Logos is the logical reasoning by citing facts, statistics, analogies, logical arguments. And pathos is making an appeal to the emotions of the audience. Team, the student is saying the video is getting stuck again and again. Can you please have a look at it? From my end, it is working fine. Just see. Okay? So this much we have discussed, right? Now I have to further take. So if you remember, when I gave you the flow chart with respect to message, we wrote message discrepancy, we wrote fear appeal, drawing conclusion, sideness of the message, emotional factual appeal, pleasant form of distractions, all of that we have written, right? So fear appeal. What I'm trying to say, let us suppose that I have to persuade you. So I am trying to create a fear, right? I am trying to create a situation. Look, if you don't follow what I'm saying, then this might happen. So I am creating a fear in you, right? So it is always said that a mild fear appeal is more effective than a very strong fear appeal. There can be two types of fear appeal. One can be strong, other can be mild, right? So it is said that a mild fear appeal is more effective than a strong fear appeal. Because if you create a strong fear appeal, then it generates panic. And once it generates panic, people become defensive. And once people become defensive, they insulate themselves from any persuasion. तो आपका तो काम फेल हो गया, आपको तो उन्हें persuade करना था, but you were not able to persuade them. So if there is any strong fear appeal, then it will generate a panic. Panic will make the target audience defensive, and defensive will lead to their insulation from any further persuasion. So your task has failed, right? So it is advisable that come up with a mild fear appeal, and not only mild fear appeal, also suggest how by changing their attitude or behavior, the negative aspect can be overcome. Is this very clear? Is it making sense? Is it clear? So you have to provide a specific recommendation that how the change in the attitude or behavior would prevent the negative aspect, as in the negative consequences which you are mentioning in the fear provoking message. Is that very clear? A very strong fear appeal only works. Strong fear appeal will only work if the source is highly credible, else it will be seen as a propaganda. So it is very important that your source has to have very good credibility. Otherwise, strong fear appeal will be visualized as a propaganda, right? So the source has to be highly credible. And secondly, your target audience needs to be uninformed. If your target audience is intelligent, they are rational, they are informed, then they will not be convinced with a strong fear appeal. So it is always advisable कि mild fear appeal create करो, बहुत strong fear appeal create करने की जरूरत नहीं है. The heading of the topic is fear appeal. हमने मैसेज का एक कैरेक्टरिस्टिक ऑफ द मैसेज में एक फ्लो चार्ट बनाया था. आई गेव यू अ टेबल in which I said source characteristic, credibility, attractiveness, power, message characteristic, message discrepancy, fear appeal, drawing conclusion, wo sab, then receiver characteristic, right? So we are discussing fear appeal. So there are two, ye likho, whatever is written on the screen, please write down. There are two kinds of fear appeal, strong and mild. Mild fear appeal works better as compared to strong fear appeal. Because strong fear appeal can generate panic, can make people defensive, बिल्कुल ऐसे ही बना लो, which can further lead to insulating themselves from any further persuasion. Next, you can write, fear appeal is effective when you also suggest. No, Neha, I'm not dictating. I'm just reading out whatever is there on the screen. मैं सिर्फ इन बिटवीन वो जो फिलर वर्ड्स नहीं होते हैं, जो कनेक्टिंग वर्ड्स होते हैं, वो डाल रही हूं. आप नहीं भी लिखोगे कनेक्टिंग वर्ड्स, फर्क नहीं पड़ता है. उतना तो आप एग्जाम में कर ही लोगे ना यार. I'm just asking you to make whatever, to write whatever is written on the screen. There are 3-4 points which I expect you to write. There are two types of fear appeal, strong and mild. Pehla point. Second point I expect you to write is mild fear appeal is more effective than strong fear appeal. Third point I expect you to write is this, that if there is strong fear appeal, it will generate panic, it will make people defensive, and they will insulate themselves from any persuasion. Fourth point, I expect you to write that along with fear appeal, you should also suggest that how by changing their attitude and behavior with respect to negative aspect can be overcome. Fifth point I expect you to write is strong fear appeal is only effective when the source is highly credible, and second, the target audience is not informed. Is this very clear? Target audience needs to be uninformed. Uninformed. Aditya, mild just means, for example, I have to persuade you ठीक है, with respect to studying, right? So I am saying that listen Aditya, you need to study, you're not understanding. If you will not study abhi se, then it would become a challenge to clear prelims, right? So you have to study abhi se, so then only, and you have to strategically study, you should not waste your time. Listen, you need to understand, you have to clear this exam if you want your future to be secured. So I am generating, otherwise listen, if you are not going to study, you will not be able to clear. What if your future doesn't get secure? So I'm creating a fear appeal, right? But if I generate a very strong fear appeal that look, if you're not going to do this, your life is totally spoiled, the purpose of your existence is only defeated, you'll be like क्या बकवास हो रहा है, इतना नहीं हो रहा है, एक एग्जाम है ये, आप इतना मत बोलो. Are you getting the point? So there are two things. एक, I am generating a fear, but there are two ways of generating a fear. एक very strong fear appeal that look, if you don't study, if you don't clear this exam, then there is no purpose of living only. Are you getting the point? This is wrong way of doing it. So if I'm going to generate this strong fear appeal, you will become defensive. You will be like, aisa kaise? It is just an exam. It is just a part of my life. How can you say that purpose of my existence is going to get defeated? However, on the other hand, if I'm telling you, look, if you don't study, you don't clear this exam, then what will you do? Because you wanted to do this, right? So obviously years of your life, the significant years of your life are getting wasted. So you should study. So I am generating fear in both the cases. But the only difference is, on one hand, it is a very strong fear appeal, which is making you defensive, which you will be like, nahi, I don't want to listen to you any further. Right? On the other hand, you'll be like, nahi yaar, baat to sahi ho rahi hai. I should study. That's the difference. Is this very clear? Is it making sense? So strong fear appeal and mild fear appeal. Strong fear appeal, in case it works only when either the other party is not informed only. Let us say you are not informed only about other options in your life. That even after studying for UPSC, God forbid, if we are not able to clear, even then there are a lot of options which are available in our life. Right? So the point here is, if you're totally uninformed, you might get impacted by the strong fear appeal. Or the source is highly credible, ki jo wo bole wo aap manoge. So then that is the situation. Otherwise, it will be seen more like a propaganda. ठीक है? Is this clear? Drawing conclusion. Drawing conclusion. Next point, drawing conclusion. See, drawing conclusion matlab, not only I am trying to persuade you with respect to any message, I am drawing conclusion also. That look, this is what ultimately I am trying to say. Is that very clear? So drawing conclusion works when my message is unstructured. So ultimately I have to tell you that look, this is what I am intending to convey. Second, my target audience is uninformed. Third, the message does not relate to their core values. Fourth, target audience do not feel that their intellect is getting questioned. Drawing conclusion is, I am not just telling you the message, I am also telling you that this is what is supposed to be done. Is that very clear? So if the message is unstructured, it is not related to the core values of the target audience, when my audience is uninformed, on the issue. And most importantly, they are not feeling insulted that their intellect is getting questioned, because I am not just telling you the message, I am also telling you what needs to be done. I am also drawing conclusion for you. So the target audience is not feeling that their intellect is getting questioned. And most importantly, there is no mistrust. Between the source and receiver. Then drawing conclusion will work. Otherwise, drawing conclusion will not work. So when you are persuading, you have to keep in mind what is the content of the message, who is your target audience, right? So it is very important that you should realize that drawing conclusion works only when the message is unstructured. तो आपको ड्रॉ करना पड़ेगा कंक्लूजन ये बताते हुए, ओके लुक दिस इज व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू कन्वे. Secondly, your audience should not be very intelligent or educated or informed. Let me put it this way. They should not be informed. If they are highly informed on the issue under consideration, then drawing conclusion will backfire. Target audience should not feel that their intellect is getting questioned. And there should not be any mistrust. क्योंकि अगर mistrust है, तो drawing conclusion backfire कर जाएगा. Is this very clear? ये points लिखो, कितने points हैं? I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Write these 5 points. Drawing conclusion works only when these 5 conditions are fulfilled. Done? I have to persuade you with respect to a message. Every message has 2 sides to it, right? Pros and cons. Sometimes you only tell one side of the story. Himani, drawing conclusion has nothing to do with fear. Fear is a separate topic. Drawing conclusion is a separate topic. Is that clear? ठीक है? See, drawing conclusion, what I'm trying to say is that if the topic is related to your core value, let us say it is related to some religious aspect of your existence, some caste aspect, some strong belief of yours, right? So if I draw conclusion, look, this is not supposed to be done. Look, this is not supposed to be done, or this is supposed to be done. ठीक है. So if you are educated, if you are informed, you would get affected, you would get offended that how can you tell me what is supposed to be done? Shouldn't the choice be with me? Are you getting the point? Let us suppose I'm addressing UPSC aspirants, right? And if I'm saying that uniform civil code should be implemented, right? It's high time that uniform civil code should be implemented. Okay. Now there are two things. I am drawing conclusion for you, right? There would be some of you will be like, yes, ma'am, it should be implemented. Some of you might question that, ma'am, there are certain issues with it. Why should it be implemented before those issues are addressed, right? So I know that my target audience is educated. I know my target audience is aware. So I will not draw the conclusion for you. I will not tell you whether it should be implemented or not. I will say this is Uniform Civil Code. These are the arguments in the favor. These are the arguments against. I will not draw conclusion for you, right? Who am I to draw conclusion for you? You might get affected by it that, ma'am, you cannot draw the conclusion for us. Absolutely. So that is what, if my target audience is intelligent, if they are informed on the issue, if it is a matter which is related to your core belief system. Uniform Civil Code can be related to your core belief system, right? So I cannot draw conclusion for you whether it should be implemented or not. At max, I can give you the information. Now the ball is in your court to decide whether it should be implemented or not. As simple as that. I can't draw conclusion for you. Is this very clear? Okay. So if my audience is intelligent, if my audience is informed, if it is related to their core values, right, I cannot draw conclusions for you, right? However, if my audience is uninformed, let us say, if that issue is not related to your core belief system, right, if the information is very unstructured, so you are just not able to understand, acha karna kya hai ye batao, to I'll be like, acha ye kar lo. Did you get the point? So ultimately what are we supposed to do? ठीक है, तो मैंने बता दिया नहीं ऐसे 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 कर सकते हैं, so बात खत्म हो गई. But it should not be related to your core belief system. Otherwise you will get offended. Is this clear for everyone? Is it making sense? किसने पूछा था? Priya, did you understand what I'm trying to say here? Similarly, जो example दिया, sideness of the message. I am saying Uniform Civil Code should be implemented. And I am just providing you one side message. I am saying Uniform Civil Code should be implemented. Okay? Or whatever it is. Okay? So if I am saying Uniform Civil Code should be implemented and you are an intelligent student, you are informed. So I have to give you both the side. What are the positives of Uniform Civil Code and what are the negatives of Uniform Civil Code? In case, what are negatives नहीं, what are the challenges in implementation of Uniform Civil Code? तो आपको दोनों साइड देना पड़ेगा. Similarly, जब भी कोई जजमेंट आता है या जब भी कोई इंपॉर्टेंट इशू आता है, फॉर एग्जाम्पल reservation. So to what extent reservation has been beneficial and what are the challenges with respect to reservation? So it has to be both pros and cons. Only then it is affected. Is that very clear? ठीक है. Now let us assume that our audience is uninformed. If my audience is uninformed about the other side of the message, and they are already agreeing with my side of the message, then what's the need? Suppose I am telling you, you should not consume chocolates, that's bad for your health. You're like, okay. Is there any need to tell you कि नहीं नहीं कभी कभी चॉकलेट खा लेनी चाहिए, कभी कभी क्या होता है ना मूड खराब होता है, and if you have something sweet then you know it plays a very important role, your mood can lighten up and everything, you'll be like यार अजीब हो, अभी तो तुमने कहा कि it is detrimental for health and now you are telling me it can you know improve my mood. So what was the need only to tell you the other side of the story when you are already agreeing, when I'm asking you not to consume the chocolates because it is harmful for your health and you agreed to it, बात खत्म हो गई. Is that very clear? However, if my audience is intelligent, if my audience is aware if my audience is intelligent, if the audience is aware about the other side of the message, and maybe the audience is carrying certain suspicion, element of suspicion or slight mistrust with respect to source agent, it is always advisable to give both the sides of the message and leave the ball in the court of the audience, whether they want to get persuaded or not. Is this very clear for everyone? So it is very important. So that's what I'm trying to say. Your job is to persuade your examiner, right? You should not underestimate the intelligence of your examiner. Your examiner is intelligent. They are informed. They are rational. They know the other side of the message. You should not present one-sided story in your answers. That's what it is. Your job is to persuade the examiner, right? So you have to give both the sides. Tabhi to most of the question talks about critical analysis. Most of the questions talks about discussion. Most of the questions talked about examination. Most of the questions talked about to what extent. So source and receiver, yaar, Vineet. So to what extent? So it is very important, give both the side of the story. If the question is reservation, tell what are the benefits of reservation so far. Also mention what are the challenges with respect to reservation. Only then you can overcome it. Why? Because the topic says issues in context of Indian society. So if you are talking about women empowerment, tell that yes, women are getting empowered in context of India. However, there are certain challenges with respect to women empowerment that needs to be overcome. Is that very clear? Is it making sense? Can we proceed? Next, pleasant form of distraction. Pleasant form of distraction. Pleasant form. Next topic is इसी में pleasant distraction. Such as food, humor. These are pleasant form of distractions. See, you need to understand, we are very normal human beings. Our span of attention is very limited. So if I want the persuasion to be effective, I need to ensure there are some pleasant form of distractions. Have you ever seen when there are important conferences or, meetings which are happening? So in that you have a tea break, right? So, or some, lunches are organized or a brunch is organized. So food acts as a pleasant form of distraction. Similarly, when we are conducting classes, many a times it happens that 3-hour class becomes a challenge. more for the students to sit and to listen to the faculty. So sometimes the jokes have to be cracked. Sometimes the humor has to be used, right? Why? To act as a pleasant form of distraction. In fact, this response portal is a very good thing. So the good thing is there are a lot of people who can, write their perspectives and they can crack a joke or something. And it acts as a pleasant form of distraction. वो जो एक heavy mood होता है class का, वो lighten up हो जाता है, right? So when you want your persuasion to be effective, then sometimes food, humor, they act as a pleasant form of distractions. Is that clear? Is it making sense? So write down. These distractions happens to increase the effectiveness of persuasive appeal. These distractions happens to increase the effectiveness of persuasive appeals. Effectiveness of persuasive appeals. Oh, is it so, Aditya? Am I the only one? Okay. But somehow I like response portal because then I don't know, that is an individual choice. But yeah, I do find this very effective means of communication. It might happen that sometimes it is misused, but that's rare. At least I've not seen in my lectures so far that it has been misused. But somehow this gives us a lot of content, response portal. It also gives us a lot of perspective, which is a good thing. Third thing, it also provides you the platform to share your point of view, which is again very important to understand subjective issues. So that's totally my perception, that I believe it has its own share of benefits. Anyway, so can we proceed now? Pleasant form of distractions. Next, channel factor एक और लिख लो. Channel factor. चैनल फैक्टर लिख लो, एक पॉइंट ये और लिख लो. See, the message is only not the important thing. In order to bring about successful persuasion, channel factor is also important, right? As in the medium through which the message is getting conveyed. Okay. Why it is important? Because it depends upon what is my target audience, and secondly, what is the nature of the message. Let us suppose message is too elongated, right? And if I just say it, so the message will be lost. If the message is quite extensive, it has to be provided in a written format, right? Now let us assume that I am providing my message in the written format, but my target audience is not able to read and write and understand. So in that situation, it will be important for me to provide them audio taping of my messages, right? So that they can hear to those messages again and again. Now, let us assume that I am providing you the audio tapes of my message, but the language in which I have conveyed the message, you are not able to understand that language. That means it has to be translated in the languages which my target audience can understand. So the channel factor is very important, and the channel factor will take into cognizance not only the frame of reference of the target audience, but also the nature of the message which has to be delivered. Is that clear? So write down. Channel is the medium. Channel is the medium through which channel is the medium through which information is presented. Channel is the medium through which information is presented, and the channel used must be compatible, and the channel used must be compatible with not only the message delivered, with not only the message delivered, but also the characteristic of the audience, but also the characteristic of the audience to whom the message is delivered. 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 क्लियर है सबको? ठीक है, चलो नेक्स्ट heading is receiver characteristic. We have done with the message characteristic. Now we are talking about the receiver characteristics. Receiver characteristic. There are three characteristics or three broad aspects in which the receiver characteristic can be taken into consideration. Let us just write something and then I'll explain. Write down. Many times, the target group members, do not intentionally, internal locus of control, नहीं मैं डिक्टेट नहीं कर रही, किसी ने पूछा है, I can't see the name, मनीष लिखा है क्या? Internal locus of control. Now let me dictate first and then I'll explain. Many times the target group members do not intentionally avoid information, but because of the culture in which they live, but because of the culture in which they live, they get exposed. I'll repeat. Many times the target group members do not intentionally avoid information, comma, but because of the culture in which they live, they get exposed only to that information. They get exposed only to that information which happens to support their existing viewpoint, which happens to support their existing viewpoint. Full stop. Even when the persuader is able to overcome, even when the persuader is able to overcome the cultural barrier, able to overcome the cultural barrier, able to overcome the cultural barrier, and reach the target group, and reach the target group, and reach the target group, there is always a possibility, there is always the possibility of selective attention and interpretation. Selective attention and interpretation. Full stop. Next, write down. The problem of selective attention, the problem of selective attention can be addressed by making the message more interesting and useful. By making the message more interesting and useful. By making the message more interesting and useful. Secondly, the interpretation issue can be addressed. The interpretation issue can be addressed if the context and illustration is provided, if the context and illustration is provided, if the context and illustration is provided to make the message clearly comprehensible, to make the message clearly comprehensible, to make the message clearly comprehensible. Now read what we have written and tell me, is there anything that you have not understood? ऐसा नहीं होता. Sometimes we believe that the target group is getting stubborn. ऐसा नहीं होता है. Maybe the socialization which has been given to the target group is such that according to them, their understanding, their attitude, their behavior is justified. Is that very clear? So they don't even realize that that attitude or behavior needs to undergo a change. For example, patriarchy that has been existing and is being practiced in every strata of our society, irrespective of caste, religion, class, ethnicity, everywhere you would see patriarchy is being practiced. And many a times we don't even question that, because that is how we have been socialized. So our culture, the setup in which we have been brought up, the value system which has been given to us is justifying certain practices which otherwise can be patriarchal in nature. Is that clear? So that becomes a challenge. Is this very clear for everyone? So their exposure has been very limited. So let us now assume that somehow by giving them education, by providing them an alternative viewpoint, I am trying to bring them, or let us say they have come out, they have started living or studying in, let us say, universities, colleges, and been studying the social sciences, where they are seeing altogether a new perspective to understand their society. Everything is happening. But even then, you have tried to take them out of their culture, but even then that value system or even then that behavior and attitude is still persisting. That can also be because they are not paying attention to your message, because maybe your message is not very interesting for them. Your message is not offering anything which is serving some purpose for them. It is not utilitarian for them. So that is why there is a very limited attention which is being paid to your message, or the message you are trying to convey is misinterpreted. So once you have addressed the problem of exposure, it is very important you address the problem of selective attention and interpretation. But most important is, often this issue is not getting resolved, because it is very difficult to change the process of socialization which one individual has gone over the period of time. So then this becomes a challenge. Is that clear? So even if this is overcome, then these two remains. So it is very important that selective exposure, attention, and interpretation needs to be addressed. And how it can be addressed, we have already talked about. Is this very clear? Is there anything which you have not understood in this? Next, there are two terms which I have used. Just write down the meaning. Self-efficacy. It's a belief that one can overcome the barriers. It's a belief that one can overcome the barriers in the path of achieving the goal. In the path of achieving the goal. So when I say, just listen to me first, when I say you are a person of high self-efficacy, इसका मतलब है you believe in your ability to overcome the obstructions, barriers, or impediments in the path of your success. Is that very clear? You believe in yourself. You believe that you can control your behavior. You believe that you have the ability to overcome the obstructions and impediments and be successful. Right? So that is self-efficacy. So we should always look for those people who are high on self-efficacy. They are the ones who believe in their ability to succeed in different situations. Is that very clear? Internal locus of control, in simple words, means your belief whether the things are in your control or not. Internal locus of control means your belief whether the things are in your control or not. Whether the things are in your control or not. For example, like my destiny is in my hand. A man is an architect of his own destiny, internal locus of control. It's your belief that whether things are in your control or not. So we should always look for those people whose locus of control is internal, because then they are not dependent on other external factors. They believe that things are in their control. They are the architect of their own destiny. They don't have to be dependent on others. Is this very clear? So you should always look for those. I remember, I think in the previous class, somebody asked me that, ma'am, if facilitators होंगे, they can easily be molded, तो फिर तो वो किसी से भी influence हो जाएंगे. And then I told you that nahin, we are going to look for those receivers who are having certain personality traits. So yes, we have to look for those people whose internal locus of control is internal, and secondly, they are high on self-efficacy, and third, they are intelligent. Is that very clear? So write down. Self-efficacy और internal locus of control की definition लिख ली है ना, अब इसके बाद लिखो. To begin with, it is difficult to convince people with high self-efficacy. To begin with, it is difficult to convince people with high self-efficacy and internal locus of control. However, once convinced, they will not be swayed away. Once convinced, they will not be swayed away by any propaganda. Is this clear? Next, intelligent people, third point, intelligent people, because of their superior critical thinking ability are less likely to be influenced by the illogical appeals. However, when presented with facts and statistics, they are likely to be convinced. When presented with facts or statistics, they are likely to be convinced. When presented with facts or statistics, they are likely to be convinced. What was the last line? As in, जो मैंने अभी कहा, that once they are convinced, it is very difficult to swayed away by any other propaganda. ऐसा कुछ? What was the last line? Which last line are you talking about? See, in case you were asking that, so what I'm just trying to say, if a person is high on self-efficacy, if person's locus of control is internal, right? So they believe in themselves. So they would not be convinced by you or persuaded by you generally. It would only happen when you are going to present them logical arguments, when you are going to support your arguments with relevant facts. Only then you will be able to persuade them. Why? Because they are not dependent on you. They believe in their ability. Their locus of control is internal. So they are not dependent on some external forces for that matter, right? So if they have to be persuaded, it has to be done only on the basis of logical reasoning. It only has to be done on the basis of facts, statistics, arguments, which are properly substantiated. You cannot say any and everything and just get away with it. They would not be getting influenced, right? And they take their time to arrive at a conclusion. Okay, so if they are getting persuaded, it will take time to persuade them. But once they are persuaded, then it would not be easy to sway away them from any means of propaganda. Is that very clear? Okay? Ashish, some believe that it is inherent, but many researchers says it can be developed also. See, to somewhere deep down the line, we all know that it's good to be honest. We all know that we should have belief in our ability to overcome the challenges. We should have the courage, right? But that courage doesn't come in vacuum. If we don't have a family who supports us, if we don't have friends who support us, if we don't have administration which is sympathetic or empathetic, that's a better word, compassionate, right? So then it becomes difficult to carry forward the courage which is required. So some believe it's an inherent quality, but many believe it can be developed also, right? How it can be developed, we will learn in some time. For example, emotional intelligence. If I से मेरा मतलब है any third party, we are able to develop that emotional intelligence in us, you will become a person of courage, right? When we develop, जो हमारे भगवद गीता में भी लिखा है, निष्काम कर्म, when we get detached from the consequences of the action and we are just performing the action by virtue of the fact that it is right, then we would not be affected and we would believe in our ability. Okay? If we are detached from the desire or the material attachments that we have, so nishkam karm to be very precise, automatically we will develop that emotional intelligence, right? So it can be learned. Yes, it can be learned. Okay? So these abilities, some believe are inherent, but many says it can be developed. Right kind of socialization, right kind of teachings, right kind of support system, whether it is media, whether it is family, it is friends, it is workplace, it is your administrative setup. If you have a strong, robust grievance redressal mechanism, if your administrative officials are compassionate, right? If your judicial system is robust, quick judgments are being given, automatically you will continue with your ability of courage, right? Is this very clear? Is it making sense? Okay. Next, so with this, all the three characteristics of the elements comes to an end. So whether it was the source characteristic, it was the message characteristic, it was the receiver characteristic. I'm giving you a question. Let's see whether you are able to answer this or not. Simple question. Write down. Differentiate between persuasion and social influence. Write down a question. Differentiate between persuasion and social influence, full stop. Differentiate between persuasion and social influence, full stop. How can persuasion be made effective? how can persuasion be made effective to bring about an attitudinal change? To bring about an attitudinal change. Question mark. Give one example where you brought a positive attitudinal change through persuasion. Give one example where you brought a positive attitudinal change through persuasion. It's a 15-marker question. I'm giving you, see, no point of discussing so far the elements if you don't understand where it can be utilized and how it needs to be utilized, right? अब ध्यान से पढ़ो इन क्वेश्चन को, 3 पार्ट्स है इस क्वेश्चन में, यूपीएससी ऐसे ही क्वेश्चंस पूछता है. And tell me, can you structure? Last line is, give one example where you brought about a positive attitudinal change through persuasion. पूरा क्वेश्चन रिपीट करूं. Differentiate between persuasion and social influence. That's the first part. How can persuasion be made effective to bring about an attitudinal change? Question mark. That's the second part. Give one example where you brought about a positive attitudinal change through persuasion. That's the third part. समझ आ रहा है क्वेश्चन? First part is a direct thing. You have to write the definition of social influence. You will write the definition of persuasion. And you will just say that social influence is the broader term while persuasion is one of its types. हमने पढ़ा है ना कि persuasion is one of the form of social influence, and I have given you the definition of both social influence and persuasion, right? तो ये तो हम कर लेंगे, ठीक है। सेकेंड पार्ट कहता है हाउ कैन परसुएशन बी मेड इफेक्टिव टू ब्रिंग अबाउट एन एटीट्यूडनल चेंज। आई एम सेइंग हाउ परसुएशन कैन बी मेड इफेक्टेड। मैम द एग्जाम्पल वी हैव टू राइट शुड बी इन लाइन विद द सेकेंड पार्ट ऑफ द क्वेश्चन। हाँ 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 प्रसन्न, यस। बिल्कुल गिरधर, एब्सोल्युटली। You can either write Aristotle's perspective, or you can write the ways to improve the characteristic of the elements of persuasion. मतलब, what steps to be taken to make the persuasion effective. First point can be, we can use experts to deliver the message, right? Remember credibility of the source, so you can write that. Then second, the message should be designed in such a way that it doesn't appear that it is challenging the intellect of the target group. Then the message should be such that it should be able to generate strong emotions among the audience. Then attractive source has more influence on the audience, right? Then if the audience is holding an attitude which is counter to the intended attitude, then it is better to use two-sided message. All I'm just trying to say is that it's a 15 marker question. पहला पार्ट हम समझ लेते हैं कि 2 to 3 marks है, because you are writing the definition one line each, and एक line बस add करनी है that persuasion is one of the form of social influence. बात खत्म, ठीक है। Then how the persuasion has to be made effective, I have already told you. So if you have a credible source, if you have an attractive source, if you have a powerful source, then it can be effective. Secondly, you have to make sure that the message discrepancy is underestimated, right? So we should choose a target audience with wider zone of acceptance. That's one way of doing it. Secondly, we should try to provide message by making it more interesting, utilitarian, making the comprehension has to be ensured, so it should be provided in a manner that it is compatible with the frame of reference of the target audience. Then if the target audience is intellectual and is holding a counter attitude, we should provide two-sided message, right? We should not make use of a strong fear appeal. यही सब तो हमने पढ़ा है. Is that very clear? And that is how it has to be written. बस इतना है कि सारे पॉइंट्स आपको मुश्किल से, since it's a 15 marker and there are 3 parts to it, and we'll assume that the second part of the question is the main part. So make sure that you are writing some 7-8 steps that how the persuasion can be made effective. So whether it is the credibility, whether it is the attractiveness, whether it is message discrepancy, whether it is sideness, ठीक है, whether it is the channel factor which has to be taken into consideration, whether it is pleasant form of distraction, all of that can be written. Is this very clear? नहीं प्रिया, इतना हम डिफरेंस नहीं करेंगे, पैरामीटर्स पे इतना डिफरेंस नहीं करेंगे, ठीक है। बिल्कुल, कंपैशन टुवर्ड्स स्ट्रे डॉग्स एग्जाम्पल इज फाइन, स्वच्छ भारत मिशन एब्सोल्युटली फाइन। Absolutely, attention, comprehension, retention, action. Anshul, perfect. बिल्कुल परफेक्ट। नहीं प्रसन्न, नहीं बच्चे, नहीं, तब तो हम मैसेज वो एग्जाम्पल बहुत बड़ा हो जाएगा। कोई भी एक एलिमेंट उठा के आप लिख सकते हो, कोई भी एक एलिमेंट, और जितना रेलेवेंट और प्रैक्टिकल लगेगा उतना यू विल फेच मार्क्स। डोंट अननेसेसरी ट्राई टू मेक योर एग्जाम्पल लुक वेरी एकेडमिक, नहीं, बट हाँ, फालतू का एग्जाम्पल भी नहीं लिखना है, बिल्कुल जुवेनाइल नहीं होना चाहिए, लेकिन बहुत एकेडमिक साउंड नहीं कराना, नहीं तो पता चल जाता है कि नहीं सही है, ठीक है। तो जितना रेलेवेंट, ऐसा तो हो नहीं सकता कि हमने अपनी लाइफ में कभी किसी को परसुएड ना किया हो, Maybe you have persuaded your friend to accept that the person has committed a mistake. ठीक है, whether you have persuaded your parents with respect to maybe some orthodox practice that they have been performing, whether you have persuaded your younger sibling or an elder sibling, whichever way, in order to perform better in their examination, whether you have persuaded in general your friends to go and vote. There are a lot of people, especially the urban educated class. Many of us are the ones who don't go and vote. They are only busy criticizing the system, but they never want to be a part of the system. Okay? So you have persuaded them that you have no right to question. You have no right to demand your rights if you are not performing your basic duties. कितनी बार ऐसा हुआ होगा कि आपने ये छोटी छोटी चीजें के लिए लोगों को परसुएड किया होगा. ठीक है, तो बड़ी चीजें हैं वैसे तो ये, लेकिन हाँ, दे आर हैपनिंग. यू माइट हैव परसुएडेड योर फ्रेंड और योर सिबलिंग और समवन यू नो टू क्विट स्मोकिंग. सो दीज आर वेरी the things that you have experienced in your personal life. ठीक है, you might have persuaded someone with respect to these menstruation issues, right? There are a lot of women who are not aware about the hygiene that needs to be maintained during menstruation. You might have persuaded someone. हम लोग अपने स्कूल कॉलेज में कितने सारे होते थे, सोशल सर्विस करते थे, तो वी यूज टू गो टू नियर बाय schools or the आंगनवाड़ीज to teach people. हमारे कॉलेज वगैरह में होता था नेशनल सोशल सर्विस वी हैड टू परफॉर्म. सो वहां पे भी आपने कितनों को परसुएड किया होगा. तो बिल्कुल, सो इफ यू स्टार्ट थिंकिंग यू विल गेट n number of examples. ऐसा हो ही नहीं सकता that at any point of your life you have not persuaded anyone with respect to anything, right? वो it's just that वो उस वक्त स्ट्राइक नहीं कर रहा होगा, लेकिन आपने जरूर किया होगा. ठीक है, बिल्कुल राहुल, एब्सोल्युटली. एट योर वर्क प्लेस, परसुएशन टू ब्रिंग डिसिप्लिन इन वर्क और प्रोजेक्ट, एब्सोल्युटली यस. वर्क प्लेस पे लिख सकते हो, सोशल इश्यूज को लेकर लिख सकते हो, ड्यूटीज को लेकर लिख सकते हो, किसी भी तरीके से लिख सकते हो. इज दैट वेरी क्लियर? आर यू अंडरस्टैंडिंग व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू से? ओके, ऑनेस्टली, डिड यू अंडरस्टैंड दैट वॉट एवर वी हैव स्टडीड सो फार? ठीक है, कोई फर्जीगिरी नहीं समझ आया है तो वो भी पूछना. जितना हमने अभी तक पढ़ा है, कैसे उसको अप्लाई करना है ये परसुएशन वाले टॉपिक में, हर चीज नहीं लिखनी है. कोई भी एक एलिमेंट उठा सकते हो. किसी ने एक्रा उठाया, किसी ने एरिस्टोटल का पर्सपेक्टिव उठाया, किसी ने ये ट्रेट्स उठाए. सब कुछ नहीं लिखना है, ठीक है, लेकिन जो लिख रहे हो उसको सही से लिखना है. डिड यू गेट द पॉइंट? Read the question. I hope it is visible for everyone. Read the question. Attitude is an important component that goes as input in the development of human being. हाँ बिल्कुल पारस, just give me 10 minutes बेटा. अगला टॉपिक is self persuasion. बिल्कुल किया जा सकता है. Yes, in fact self persuasion is the best thing. If we know the art of self persuasion, there is nothing better than that. फिर हमें किसी पे डिपेंड नहीं होना पड़ेगा. कितनी बार ऐसा होता है ना कि डीमोटिवेटेड फील कर रहे होते हैं. कितनी बार ऐसा होता है यार, सही चूज किया ना यूपीएससी की तैयारी करके. ठीक है, मेरे साथ तो बहुत बार हुआ था while preparing कि is the decision right, my friends are doing so well. ठीक है, yeah, absolutely Paras, I am talking about this only. ठीक है, yes बच्चे, self persuasion is very good if you can do that. क्योंकि पता है क्या, ऐसा नहीं है कि फ्रेंड्स नहीं होते, फैमिली नहीं होती, दे आर ऑलवेज देयर. बट एक टाइम के बाद ना वो भी नहीं समझ पाते हैं कि क्या, क्योंकि वी आर द वन हु आर फेसिंग द क्राइसिस. इसीलिए आई ऑलवेज से कि कभी भी ना आइसोलेशन में पढ़ाई नहीं करनी चाहिए. यू शुड ऑलवेज हैव अ ग्रुप. बिकॉज पता है, जब लोग साथ में होते हैं ना एंड दे आर गोइंग थ्रू द सिमिलर सिचुएशन, दे कैन अंडरस्टैंड यू बेटर. बट एक टाइम वो भी आएगा जब कोचिंग खत्म हो जाएगी, जब मे बी सम आर राइटिंग अटेम्प्ट दिस ईयर, सम माइट बी राइटिंग अटेम्प्ट नेक्स्ट ईयर. फिर एक टाइम आएगा, गॉड फॉरबिड, हो जाता है ना ऊपर नीचे. और इसमें ये नहीं है कि आपकी तैयारी में कोई कमी थी. इट्स जस्ट दैट कि कंपटीशन बहुत स्टिफ है, सीट्स बहुत लिमिटेड है, तो थोड़ा ऊपर नीचे रिजल्ट हो जाता है. उस सिचुएशन में देयर many a times there is a situation when there is no one to to give you that persuasion कि नहीं, लगे रहो, हो जाएगा. your teachers are not there, your mentors are not there, your family भी नहीं समझ पा रही होती है, कभी कभी उनकी गलती नहीं होती है यार, they have not been through it, so maybe they are not able to sometimes. So the point here is उसमें खुद को persuade करना आना चाहिए. That's very important. Now read the question. Attitude is an important component that goes as input in the development of human being. How to build a suitable attitude needed for public servant. Don't look at the answer. Just tell me, reading the question, can you answer this? Do you understand the first statement that attitude is very important? I told you, na, attitude is a specific determinant of your behavior. It shows the readiness of your psyche to act or react in a certain way. आप किस तरह के ह्यूमन बीइंग बनोगे और हो, a very important role is played by your attitude. नहीं नहीं, absolutely आशीष, yes, absolutely. See, इसीलिए तो सपोर्ट सिस्टम होता है, इसीलिए तो फैमिली, फ्रेंड्स, पीयर ग्रुप, वर्क प्लेस, टीचर्स, मेंटर्स, एवरीवन इज इंपॉर्टेंट. ये तो है ही है. हम उस सिचुएशन की बात कर रहे हैं कि अगर बाय चांस दे आर नॉट देयर. भाई होता है ना, कभी कभी पेरेंट्स भी अपनी परेशानी को लेकर बिजी हैं, दे हैव अदर प्रॉब्लम्स इन लाइफ, सो यू डोंट वांट टू फर्दर स्ट्रेस देम. Sometimes it might happen that your friends are also busy in their life. You don't want to stress them. उस situation में क्या? That time self-persuasion is important. This support system, there is no substitute to this. There cannot be any substitute to your family, friends, mentor, teachers. Nothing can substitute their presence. Right? But sometimes, when due to some factor they are not there, then one should also know how to self-persuade. That's what we are discussing. Is that clear? अब चलो क्वेश्चन देखो जल्दी से. नहीं, बिल्कुल बिल्कुल एकेडमिक मत सोचो. आप बहुत ध्यान से क्वेश्चन को वापस पढ़ो. एटीट्यूड इज एन इंपॉर्टेंट कंपोनेंट दैट गोज एज एन इनपुट इन द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ ह्यूमन बीइंग. इट्स अ स्टेटमेंट विच इज गिवन टू यू, राइट? सो यू विल स्टार्ट विथ द डेफिनेशन ऑफ एटीट्यूड, और कोई भी एक डेफिनेशन लिख दी हमने, क्योंकि भाई एकेडमिक पेपर है, थोड़ा तो एकेडमिक लिखेंगे. यू स्टार्टेड विद द डेफिनेशन. However, remember I told you that if you look at the glass which is half filled, it is your attitude which will determine whether you are viewing that glass as half filled or half empty. Is this very clear? So your attitude will determine what is going to be your behavior. We have to ensure that the public servant has the right kind of attitude. Because अगर आपका और मेरा behavior थोड़ा सा गलत हो भी जाए, so the ramifications would not be very strong, because we are common man. ठीक है? That doesn't mean that we have the right to behave in a wrong way, but I'm generally saying. But एक public servant के, एक administrative official के behavior पे the ramifications are very strong. Because there are a lot of people who are dependent on the actions of the public servant. So the public servant should have the right kind of attitude. क्योंकि अगर राइट काइंड ऑफ एटीट्यूड होगा पब्लिक सर्वेंट में, सो दे विल बी कंपैशनेट, they will have problem solving approach, they will have the courage, they will have the confidence to take some initiative, obviously in the right direction. Is this very clear? Is it making sense? ठीक है. How to develop right kind of attitude, आपको सिर्फ socialization के agencies के बारे में बात करनी थी. I told you how attitude is shaped through different agencies of socialization. आपने एक लाइन में बता दिया what kind of right attitude are you looking for. I am looking for the attitude of courage. I am looking for wisdom. I am looking for rationality. I am looking for problem solving approach. I have told this to the examiner that this is the right attitude in the public servant I am talking about. Now the question arises, how will you develop that right kind of attitude? So इंट्रोडक्शन में मैंने ये स्टैब्लिश करा दैट हाउ एटीट्यूड is responsible for shaping what kind of human being you are, because it is a specific determinant of your behavior. There exists attitude behavior consistency, but iske beyond prasant we don't have to go. Right? Now the question is that right kind of attitude se mera kya matlab hai? Now comes the main part of the question, how that right kind of attitude will be shaped. हमने पढ़ा है ना agencies of socialization. I told you your value system, your attitude, your morals, your ethics are all shaped by the agencies of socialization. I also told you the methods of socialization. Remember, instrumental conditioning, maximizing rewards, minimizing punishment, democratic parenting, ठीक है? Social influence, what kind of social setting you have been brought up, your family, your religion, your community, different agencies of socialization, whether it is media, whether it is educational institutes, whether it is peer group, whether it is role models, whether it is religion, how can this be used to build the right kind of attitude? Vicarious reinforcement, formal agencies to inculcate the attitude of brotherhood, excellence, leadership, team spirit, peer group, which is responsible for shaping our occupational interpersonal life goals. Religion can teach us the spirit of service and devotion to people. Role model, exposure to great personalities. Team building exercises can help in shaping your attitude. Institutionalizing the code of conduct. एकदम कोड ऑफ कंडक्ट, ये आप पढ़ा भी होगा, जतिन सर ने पढ़ाया भी होगा कि प्रैग्मेटिक सेट ऑफ गाइडलाइंस आपको एस्टैब्लिश करनी है टू शेप द एटीट्यूड अमंग द पब्लिक सर्वेंट्स. देन मॉरल वैल्यूज इम्बाइब करना, भगवत गीता की टीचिंग्स, निष्काम कर्म, सब कुछ नहीं लिखना है, जो आपको उस वक्त स्ट्राइक कर जाए. इज दैट वेरी क्लियर? ठीक. एंड देन यू कैन कंक्लूड अ पब्लिक सर्वेंट इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर द वेलफेयर ऑफ नेशन, गुड गवर्नेंस, हेंस डेवलपमेंट ऑफ राइट एटीट्यूड इज एसेंशियल. एक लाइन में कंक्लूड करके खत्म किया. नाउ अंशुल इज आस्किंग कि मैम एकदम से स्ट्राइक नहीं करता है. अंशुल एक बात हमेशा याद रखना, अगर तो बोला जाए कि एटीट्यूड, वैल्यू सिस्टम कैसे डेवलप करते हैं, ऑटोमेटिकली योर थॉट प्रोसेस विल बी गोइंग टुवर्ड सोशलाइजेशन. उसमें यही पूछा है ना, कैसे डेवलप करते हैं. एंड आई हैव ऑलरेडी टोल्ड यू, वैल्यू, एटीट्यूड, मॉरल, एथिक्स, you have to develop through socialization. It is developed through socialization. So there are techniques of socialization and there are agencies of socialization. It is clearly written. How to develop a suitable attitude which is needed for a public servant. तो दो चीजें हैं यहां पर. That before you are becoming a public servant, what kind of or how to develop that attitude, and once you enter into the process of training, then also how to shape the attitude, because it's a continuous process. Socialization is not something which starts at a certain age and ends there. It is a lifelong process. और एक बार जो एटीट्यूड डेवलप हो गया, सो डू यू रियली थिंक दैट बिफोर बिकमिंग अ पब्लिक सर्वेंट वी आर हैविंग अ सर्टेन एटीट्यूड, वी हैव अ वेरी लैकडासिकल एटीट्यूड, वी आर नॉट कंसर्न्ड अबाउट द प्लाइट ऑफ अदर्स? डू यू रियली थिंक एग्जाम क्लियर करके हम अचानक से एनलाइटनमेंट हो जाएगा और हम बदल जाएंगे? नहीं. the attitude tends to stay for much longer period of time as we expect. ठीक है ना? So it is very important right from the beginning, right kind of attitude should be developed. However, once you are entering into the services also, there also your attitude can further be improved through those, team building exercises and everything. There was a scheme also which was launched by the government with respect to public servants, how to instill right kind of attitude. Then all the code of conduct, जो वो एक डिटेल कोड ऑफ कंडक्ट होता है कि दिस इज हाउ द एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर शुड कंडक्ट देमसेल्व्स when interacting in the public space. So all of that will further shape our attitude. Is that clear? अगर मुझसे पूछो कि जब मैं क्वेश्चन देखती हूं तो मुझे कैसे स्ट्राइक करता है, बहुत बार ऐसा होता है मुझे भी नहीं स्ट्राइक करता. मैं क्या करती हूं मैं वो बता सकती हूं. I try to read the question and try to interpret in my mother tongue. I know as in हिंदी. ठीक है, तो मैं क्या करती हूँ, इंग्लिश का भी क्वेश्चन होता है तो मैं उसको हिंदी में आई यूज टू थिंक लाउड एज इन माई माइंड कि ये एग्जैक्टली क्वेश्चन पूछना क्या चाह रहा है. ठीक है, तो जिस भी लैंग्वेज में आप कंफर्टेबल हो, ये मैं आपको बिल्कुल बेसिक बता रही हूँ, इट्स नथिंग अकेडमिक. आई एज एन इंडिविजुअल who has been an aspirant, ठीक है, in her past, मैं कैसे इंटरप्रेट करती थी, तो मैं क्वेश्चन पढ़ती थी. I used to think aloud in my mind the question in a language which I'm comfortable with, that is Hindi, and then I used to think what exactly the question is demanding. तो स्पष्ट हिंदी में वो मुझसे क्या डिमांड कर रहा है मैं ये सोचती थी. आई यूज टू ब्रेक डाउन द क्वेश्चन इनटू सब पार्ट्स दैट एग्जैक्टली व्हाट दिस क्वेश्चन इज ट्राइंग टू आस्क एंड देन आई यूज टू आंसर. ठीक है, एंड आई नेवर यूज टू थिंक कि मैंने वहां क्या पढ़ा था, वो नहीं, वो मैं तब सोचती थी जब द क्वेश्चन यूज टू बी फैक्चुअल और द क्वेश्चन हैज अ लिमिटेड कंटेंट. सॉरी, the question has a very limited content, but jahan pe subjectivity, wherever the subjectivity is there and I can play with the content, then I never used to think acha us class mein kya padha ya wo concept kaise apply kare. nahi, especially ethics mein you don't have to think like this. You have to write whatever is being asked, and while writing that, if some academic content is coming, good. You don't have to go back to the academic content and try to fit in the question. No, that's not the strategy. In ethics, first we think what is being asked, what is supposed to be written, and while writing, can I add some academic flavor to it? Bus. Is that very clear? So the what is being asked, what is the context, and what should be written is of prime importance. Within that, if you are adding some academic content or some definition or some, then it is fine. लेकिन अगर तुम पहले academic content सोचो और फिर उसको fit करने की कोशिश करो, ऐसे नहीं होता ethics के answers. Is this very clear? Snigdha, doesn't matter. You can write any answer as per your convenience. You can write any answer. Absolutely no issues. Yes, Rimjim, I do believe in ethics paper as well as society. You should be thorough with vocabularies. It adds more richness to your content. Absolutely, Mission Karma Yogi. That is what I was talking about. Snigdha, absolutely no issues, bache. Whichever answer you are comfortable with, whichever answer you can think of at that point of time, it is acceptable. Is this very clear? Is it making sense? Can I proceed? Last topic. Self-persuasion. Along with that, cognitive dissonance. Self-persuasion plus cognitive dissonance. Write down. Cognitive dissonance refers to the mental discomfort Yeah, Manish, that attitude wala question is this year's question. This question, attitude wala, this 2021 question. It's available on the Telegram channel. Ethics 2021 mains में जाके देखोगे. This is the first question. ठीक है? आशीष, अगर पूछा जाए that give an example from your everyday life, जो कि यूपीएससी पूछता है, राइट? या पूछा जाए what according to you, give some example, what according to you is, मतलब क्वेश्चन मार्क कुछ जो टॉपिक है, and then give examples. So you can give your real life examples. But if it is not asked from your everyday examples, then you can give academic examples. लेकिन जब रियल लाइफ पूछते हैं तब रियल लाइफ देने चाहिए. ठीक है? Write down cognitive dissonance. It refers to mental discomfort. It refers to mental discomfort experienced by a person who simultaneously, I'll repeat, cognitive dissonance refers to mental discomfort experienced by a person who simultaneously holds two or more contradictory beliefs, values, or ideas. Holds two or more contradictory beliefs, values, or ideas. Full stop. It also refers to a state of having, inconsistent thought or attitude, especially with respect to behavioral decision. Inconsistent thought or attitude, especially with respect to behavioral decision. For example, you want to be an IAS officer, but you don't feel like studying. Cognitive dissonance. You want to live a long life, but you don't want to quit smoking. Cognitive dissonance. Did you get the point? So cognitive dissonance is a mental discomfort which is created because of having contradictory attitude, because of having a discrepancy in your attitude and the behavior that you are performing. Is that very clear? Clear hai? I don't want to be corrupt, but then I also want to lead a luxurious life. So on one hand, I am not a supporter of corruption at all. But then I also want a comfortable life as others are leading. Again, cognitive dissonance. You don't want to cheat, but then you don't want to disappoint your family also, who have a lot of expectations from you. Again, cognitive dissonance. So whenever you are in a situation of mental discomfort because of having contradictory attitudes, contradictory values, for example, you are a doctor. You are confronted with two situations. On one hand, it says that you have to save the life of the patient. On the other hand, you know the patient doesn't have the money to give you, right? So your social, medical ethics as well as your economic values, they are in confrontation, right? So then again, cognitive dissonance. On one hand, hospitals bolte na pehle form bharo, dikh raha hai that you know the person is dying, but then in order to fulfill your economic interest, you want that the person should first, submit the fee which is required for the treatment. Only then the person would be treated. Again, एक कहता है individual morality that you should first work towards saving the patient. On the other hand, it is your economic interest. So again, you are in a situation of dissonance. Is this very clear? आपका cognitive dissonance. You are an administrative official. You know the other people are silently, peacefully protesting. You are in that cognitive dissonance. Why? Because you have got the orders from the higher officials that you have to, use lathi charge to disperse the crowd, or the water cannons to disperse the crowd, or tear gas to disperse the crowd. So again, you are in the situation of dissonance. Right? Is that very clear? Is it making sense? So basically, cognitive dissonance is a mental discomfort which is experienced by the person who is holding contradictory beliefs, attitude, values, or their attitude is not in sync with their behavior. Is this very clear? Okay. So one of the way of overcoming cognitive dissonance is self-persuasion. Write down. It is an attempt by the individual. It is an attempt by the individual to change his attitude and behavior. It is an attempt by the individual to change his attitude and behavior in the desired direction. मैं self persuasion बता रही हूँ. One of the ways of overcoming cognitive dissonance is self-persuasion. Write down, it is an attempt it is by an individual to change his attitude and behavior in the desired direction through the use of self-suggestion. Through the use of self-suggestion. Whenever a person notices some discrepancy between the behavior they perform, whenever a person notices some discrepancy between the behavior they perform and suggestion they provide to themselves, it is likely to create a state of dissonance. It is likely to create a state of dissonance. And it will compel the person to take steps to reduce it. It will compel the person to take steps to reduce it. Now read this. I am just thinking how to answer your question. Give me 2 minutes. Till the time you read whatever I've made you write. Do you understand that ethical dilemma is a situation which is created? I was just thinking, I was finding the right words to answer this. Ethical dilemma is a situation which is created where you are in a dilemma that which action to take. Right? This is what you have understood from ethical dilemmas. That's my question. I'm asking you guys. You've studied ethical dilemma, right? So my question to you is, what do you mean when we say ethical dilemma? Let's put it this way. You will understand it better. Girdhar, just wait, Nabi. Okay? This is what you've studied. I'm asking you guys. What have you studied? What is ethical dilemma? It's a situation, right? When you are in a state of dilemma, whether to act like this or to act like this, right? This is what is ethical dilemma. Cognitive dissonance is not a situation. It's a mental discomfort which is created. And it's a mental discomfort which is created. Why? Because your attitude is saying something else and your behavior is saying something else. Right? Or it is a mental discomfort which is being created. It's a kind of, do you realize, अगर मुझे cognitive dissonance word से कुछ को relate करना हो तो मैं crisis of conscience को better relate कर पाऊंगी rather than ethical dilemma. See, ethical dilemma is in a situation how you are supposed to act. But cognitive dissonance is a mental distress which is being created. And that distress is being created because either at the same time you are holding two conflicting values, or your attitude values are something else, but that is not getting reflected in your behavior, right? So now you are not acting according to your value system. Your behavior is saying something else. Your value system is saying something else. Or you are at the same time having two conflicting set of values. So a kind of a guilt, remorse, or a very uncomfortable situation is being created in your mind. You are not at peace with yourself. That is cognitive dissonance. Ethical dilemma is a situation. Exactly. Let's put it this way. Cognitive dissonance is something which is in your mind. Dilemma is a situation which is existing, and cognitive dissonance is in your mind. Is this very clear? You got the point. ठीक है. मैं actually इतनी देर से यही सोच रही थी, how should I put it in words that it gets conveyed. Did you get the point now? ठीक है, चलो लिखो. कभी कभी क्या होता है, कॉग्निटिव डिसोनेंस क्यों भी आ जाता है, हम ना जस्टिफाई करते हैं अपने बिहेवियर को. जैसे मैंने आपसे कहा अभी कि डिसोनेंस कैसे क्रिएट हुआ, दैट आई वांट टू लिव अ लॉन्ग लाइफ, राइट. एक सेकेंड. इज इट लाइक मुझे पता है क्या करना है, फोन नहीं चलाना है, फिर भी चला रही हूं. हाँ रिमझिम, हाँ ये कह सकते हैं कि कॉग्निटिव डिसोनेंस तो छोटी छोटी चीजों में भी आ जाता है. ठीक है. एथिकल डायलेमा इज अ बिगर इशू. इट इज इन अ सिचुएशन. बिल्कुल आदित्य, बिल्कुल बिल्कुल बिल्कुल. बट कॉग्निटिव डिसोनेंस कैन बी एट वेरियस लेवल्स. But cognitive dissonance is something which is internal. हाँ, ऐसा हो सकता है that because of ethical dilemma there is a cognitive dissonance, right? But cognitive dissonance can be on very small issues as well. फॉर एग्जाम्पल इसमें एथिक्स कहां से आ जाएंगे? अगर मुझे आईएएस बनना है लेकिन मेरा पढ़ने का मन नहीं कर रहा है, cognitive dissonance can be in your everyday life. Ethical dilemmas are something which is in a situation, in a particular situation, but because of ethical dilemma there can be a cognitive dissonance. Let us put it this way. Yes, yes, Ashish, yes, we can say that. Yes, ethical dilemma is created due to certain situation, and cognitive dissonance is also happening in a situation, but that cognitive dissonance is a mental discomfort which is being created, right? And cognitive dissonance can be for a very small issues as well. Is that very clear? Whereas ethical dilemma are a larger aspect. Is this very clear? ठीक है, write down. We take steps to reduce the situation of dissonance. We take steps to reduce the situation of dissonance. For example, best है either you change your attitude or you change your behavior. Dissonance ही खत्म, ठीक है? So either I change my attitude or I change my behavior. That's one thing, which rarely happens. So that's one thing. Or trivialization of the issue. Trivialization of the issue. You are trivializing the issue. That is downplaying the importance or significance of inconsistent attitude and behavior. Downplaying the significance of inconsistent attitude and behavior. डिक्टेशन क्या था? कहां से रिपीट करूं? I just said that whenever we are in a situation of dissonance, we take steps to reduce it. Whenever we are in a situation of dissonance, we take steps to reduce it. First, either the attitude or the behavioral change. Second, by trivialization of the issue. By trivialization of the issue. That is downplaying the importance or significance of inconsistent attitude and behavior. Or by adding information which is supporting your existing attitude or behavior. By adding information which is supporting your existing attitude or behavior. आप justify कर रहे हो अपने actions को. आपको कहीं ना कहीं पता है you are doing it wrong, but then you are justifying your actions or you are trivializing the situation. See, the best way is either change your attitude or behavior to make it consistent. If you are not doing that, then either to reduce the dissonance, because वो discomforting feeling किसी को अच्छी नहीं लगती है, तो वो जब discomforting situation create हो गई है, that guilt is getting generated, remorse is there, tension is there, तो उसको reduce करने के लिए either you justify your action by adding some information to it, or you trivialize only. अरे चलता है, every other person does that. Is that very clear? Or it can also be reduced by indirect means, it can also be reduced by indirect means, that is, it can also be reduced by indirect means, that is, the basic discrepancy between attitude and behavior is left intact, between attitude and behavior is left intact, but the unpleasant feeling generated by dissonance is removed. But the unpleasant feeling generated by dissonance is removed. For example, self-affirmation. I'll explain. For example, self-affirmation. For example, self-affirmation. Ashish, I'll explain everything. Ashish, if I have to give you an example, see, everyone knows corruption is wrong. Everyone. We are still performing corrupt activities, right? A dissonance is created because you know corruption is wrong, still you are practicing corrupt activities. How will I trivialize? Chalta hai culture. Everyone is corrupt. Everyone is doing it. It's a chalta hai culture. Babu culture hai ye. Did you get my point? You have trivialized the issue. इतनी कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है. Corruption ही तो है, सभी करते हैं. I have trivialized it. The significance has been downplayed. It's okay. It's nothing new. I am not the only person who's practicing corruption. So I am trying to trivialize the issue. Chalta hai culture. It's okay. Is this very clear? Is it making sense? Then you can also justify. See, sometimes corruption is very important. See, sometimes what happens ना कि corruption करने से ना faster dissemination हो जाता है काम का. Because आप पैसे खिला देते हो, जल्दी जल्दी काम होता है, जल्दी जल्दी फाइल मूव करती है. आप unnecessarily justify कर रहे हो corruption को, right? Did you get my point? That is justification. Adding more information to justify your actions. That यार corruption कभी कभी it is important. Why it is important? Because it will ensure faster movement of the files. So the larger interest, the scheme will be implemented at a faster pace. ये थोड़ी ना होता है कि you are justifying wrong action to you are performing wrong action to justify the consequences. ऐसे थोड़ी ना होता है. But then this is how it is being done. So you are justifying that. At the same time, फिर मैंने बोला कि नहीं, this is wrong. Mahatma Gandhi says there cannot be a wrong way of doing the right thing. You cannot justify. Then you'll be like, listen, चलता है. सब कर रहे हैं. मेरे एक अकेले honest होने से क्या हो जाएगा? So you have trivialized the issue only. Right? Now these are the direct means of reducing dissonance. There is an indirect means which I told you, where this attitude, behavior, inconsistency is left intact. But उसकी वजह से जो unpleasant feeling generate हुई थी, I have to reduce that feeling. How am I going to do that? By self-affirmation. Listen, otherwise I'm a very good person. It's just that in this particular activity, I have practiced corruption because that was the need of the hour. Otherwise, I'm a very nice, very honest person. I have never ever done anything wrong in my life. It is only this one time that I have done something which is wrong. So I am trying to self-affirm myself. Why? That attitude, behavior, inconsistency is left intact. But that unpleasant feeling which was generated because of that, I am trying to reduce it. How am I trying to reduce it? By self-affirming that, look, I am a good person otherwise. I have never done anything which is wrong. It is only this one time that I have committed an act of corruption. Is this very clear? So write down. Self-affirmation लिखा, उसके बाद लिखो which involves restoration of positive self-evaluation, which involves restoration of positive self-evaluation that are threatened, that are threatened by dissonance, that are threatened by dissonance, by focusing upon positive self attributes. I'll repeat, which involves restoration of positive self evaluation that are threatened by dissonance, by focusing upon positive self attributes, by focusing upon positive self attributes, by focusing upon positive self attributes. Clear है? Write down a question. What do you mean by cognitive dissonance? What do you mean by cognitive dissonance? Also suggest some measures to overcome it. Also suggest some measures to overcome it. Also suggest some measures to overcome it. Ten-marker question. Again, I'm just suggesting you, I told you now, lastly, I'll suggest you how the answers can be written. Let us suppose you have to persuade someone, right? You have to change their attitude with respect to certain behavior. This is the behavior which I expect. Okay. This behavior will be ensured only when the individual has the intention to behave. Right? How does the intention is determined? It is determined on the basis of what is the attitude with respect to that behavior, what are the subjective norms with respect to that behavior, and what is the perceived behavioral control. If all these three things are there, then the individual will have the intention to behave. If the individual has the intention to behave, the behavior is guaranteed. Is this clear? ये बनाओ फिर बताती हूँ. Once you have made this, let me know. Done? Now, let me tell you the reason why I'm discussing this with you. Now, let us suppose you are an administrator, right, who has to implement family planning. आशीष, जनरलाइज करके नहीं बोल सकती हूँ. फिल्मी नहीं लगेगा अगर मैं जनरलाइज करके बोल दूंगी कि दिल की सुननी चाहिए. बट मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि अगर इंडिविजुअल कैपेसिटी में, आई एम नॉट आंसरिंग इन द कैपेसिटी ऑफ अ टीचर, आई एम आंसरिंग इन अ इंडिविजुअल कैपेसिटी, कि कहीं ना कहीं हम सबको पता होता है व्हाट इज द राइट थिंग टू डू. समवेयर डीप डाउन द लाइन वी नो. It's just that we are not ready to accept it. So yeah, whatever your inner self is suggesting, one should do that, because that's a very individual belief, and that's why I'm saying, I'm not saying in a capacity of a teacher. I'm saying it as a capacity of an individual, that kahin na kahin we all know what is the right thing to do. It's just that either we don't have the courage to do it, we are too lazy to do it, we are not ready to accept, and we don't want to question ourselves, we don't want to be showed in the bad light, we are afraid of the consequences. There are a lot many things, but somewhere deep down the line you know what is the right thing to do. Okay, let's quickly. Okay, so let us suppose that we have to implement family planning. I want the people to diligently follow family planning norms. So I want their behavior should be in alignment or in sync with family planning norms. This can be ensured if they have the intention to do that, right? The intention will be ensured by knowing what is their attitude towards the behavior. Matlab, what is their attitude towards family planning? If they have a positive attitude towards family planning, if they believe that the society is also in the favor of family planning, and in case they have the confidence that they can have a control over their behavior, they can go for family planning, then that will reflect in their intention and the behavior would be guaranteed. Now, you have to persuade the other party. I have to plan their behavior. So I have to make sure that their attitude is positive. I have to create subjective norms favorable with respect to family planning, and I have to create an ecosystem where people believe that they can control their behavior. Is that very clear? ठीक है. So this is what, ये जो कहते नहीं है वो काउंटर एक्सरसाइज करना कि ये हमको चाहिए, इसको इंश्योर करने के लिए इंटेंशन चाहिए. इंटेंशन किन फैक्टर्स से गारंटीड होता है? इन 3 फैक्टर्स से. कीपिंग दिस इन माइंड, आई हैव टू इंप्लीमेंट. नाउ यू आर एन एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर, आई एम आस्किंग द क्वेश्चन, यू हैव टू इंप्लीमेंट फैमिली प्लानिंग. बिल्कुल उसमें मत जाना एकेडमिक डोमेन में. मैंने तुमको 3 ब्रॉड पॉइंट्स दिए हैं, ट्राई टू आंसर इट. वी आर डिस्कसिंग. I am not expecting answers from you. I am just saying family planning करनी है. ठीक है. You all have studied the factors which are responsible for high fertility rate. I have taught that in society. One of the factors was, let us say, people believe more number of children are more number of working hands, right? Poverty can be the reason, lack of awareness, lack of affordability, lack of accessibility towards contraceptives, that can be the reason, right? Desirability for male child or son meta preference. There can be too many factors which can be responsible for their attitude towards the behavior. So basically these people have a counter attitude. तभी ना आपको उनको persuade करना है. अगर वो positively disposed हैं towards family planning, तो फिर तो आपको जरूरत ही नहीं है उन्हें persuade करने की. They are not positively disposed towards family planning. That means they have a counter attitude. So first thing I have to do is I have to change their attitude towards family planning, right? And remember, attitude is there because it is serving some need for you. So let me assume, I'm giving a situation, let me assume people are going for more number of children. Why? Because they believe more number of children are more number of working hands, right? Now I have to change this attitude. So I have to convince them that more number of children is more number of working hands only in a short-term situation. But since your child will be indulged in child labor, it threatens their opportunity for education, skill development, and in a long run, they can become a liability rather than an asset. Right? So I have to develop an attitude which is favorable towards family planning. So whatever is the existing attitude, I have to change it. And I know an attitude exists because it is serving some need. So either I change the need or I suggest an alternative attitude which can serve their existing need better. At the same time, an individual is also influenced by what are the norms which are existing in society, right? So if I create an ecosystem where I make them believe that we support the idea of family planning, for example, I provide conditional cash transfers, or there are norms which says that if you have more than 2 children, then you cannot contest for the panchayat elections. I'm just giving you an example. So I have created subjective norms which are favorable towards family planning. And third thing, many people might fear, although they wanted to adopt family planning practices, but then they had the fear, what if they are reprimanded by their community? What if they are boycotted by their community? Right? So then that would be a challenge. So then I have to create an ecosystem where I make them believe that, look, you should be a person of internal locus of control. You should have high self-efficacy. You can control your actions. Your actions are in your control. Not it should be determined by the outside forces. उसके लिए मुझे क्या करना पड़ेगा? I have to ensure good governance. I will have to ensure proper grievance redressal mechanism. I have to ensure proper transparency, accountability in my administration. Automatically, these people will gain courage to take right actions. Why? Because they know that they have the support of the administrative ecosystem. Is that very clear? I have just given you one example. That this is also the way of writing the answer. And how can you start the answer? Remember in yesterday's lecture, first we need to identify who are the facilitators, because then it will have a snowballing effect. Once you have identified the facilitator, you have to change their attitude with respect to family planning. How can you change their attitude? Now this depends upon you. Provide them cost and benefit analysis, provide them how more number of children in the long run becomes a liability because they don't get proper nutrition, they don't get proper education, they don't get proper skill development. Okay, that's one thing, right? Or you can change the attitude. By attitude change करना है, persuasion के इतनी सारी तरीके हैं, charismatic personalities को ले आओ, ठीक है, rewards create करो, right? So you can change the attitude. So attitude can be changed through maximizing their rewards, minimizing their punishment. The attitude can be changed by suggesting them an alternative attitude which can serve their existing need better. If they are going for more number of children because of more number of economic needs, then it can be changed. If they are going for more number of children because they want to have a male child, because they believe that the female child is a burden, so change their perception with respect to female child. Give them examples that how daughters have acted as a good support system for many families, right? So show them all of that. Then bring about adequate norms to encourage family planning, whether it is conditional cash transfers or conditions with respect to election to panchayat, or promote the importance of girl child, beti bachao, beti padhao, Sukanya Samriddhi Yojana, etc. And finally, improve the internal locus of control. How will you do that? Democratic governance, good governance, grievance redressal system, transparency, accountability, and your answer is ready. अब यहां पे आप स्वच्छ भारत मिशन डालो, आप कास्ट प्रेजुडिसेस डालो, आप एजुकेशन ऑफ गर्ल चाइल्ड डालो, राइट, चाइल्ड लेबर डालो, फैमिली प्लानिंग डालो, कोई भी मुद्दे पे क्वेश्चन आ जाए, यू कैन राइट इट लाइक दिस. You need to tell me, did you understand what I'm trying to say? Is there anything that you've not understood so far? If there is anything which you have not understood, please ask. Write down a question. How to persuade people with respect to education of girl child? How to persuade people with respect to education of girl child? Similarly, एक और लिखो, how to ensure people's cooperation towards Swachh Bharat mission. How to ensure people's cooperation towards Swachh Bharat mission. How to ensure people's cooperation towards Swachh Bharat mission. Clear है? Try attempting these questions by using this, right? By using this explanation, try to attempt these questions. You will get a better understanding. एक क्वेश्चन था यूपीएससी का, how social influence and persuasion can be used for successful implementation of Swachh Bharat mission. That was the question UPSC asked. How social influence and persuasion can be used to ensure successful implementation of Swachh Bharat mission. To ensure successful implementation of Swachh Bharat mission. Is this clear? With this, the topic of attitude comes to an end. Can we proceed? The next topic that we have to talk about is emotional intelligence. Make this flowchart. Emotional intelligence. This is how we will proceed. What do you mean by emotions? What are the myths with respect to emotions? There can be different types of emotions. For example, positive emotion, negative emotion, primary emotion, secondary emotion. Concept of emotional intelligence. Building blocks of emotional intelligence, Daniel Goleman's perspective. Role of emotional intelligence in administration. Can emotional intelligence be learned? And finally, emotional intelligence in Indian context. Emotional intelligence in Indian context. Once you have made this flowchart, let me know. I'll continue. Once you have made this flowchart, please let me know. I'll continue. Done? ठीक है? See, if you remember the first class in which I was talking about the components of VAME, and I said cognitive, affection, and behavioral tendency, in that I gave you the definition of emotion. Remember that emotions are nothing but bodily arousal. They are nothing but reaction to the events which are either internal or external. I told you every individual emotions are the basic aspect of human functioning. Every human being is capable of experiencing emotions. Emotions are nothing but the complex interplay of physiological, cognitive and situational variables. ये definition लिखी है ना, ठीक है? अगर फिर भी कोई confusion हो तो एक आध लाइन में फिर से लिख लो, but मैंने ये लिखवाई है. I still remember. Emotions are nothing but bodily arousal. बस दो चार लाइन ऐसी लिख लो just to maintain continuity. Emotions are nothing but bodily arousal which are reaction to the events either internal or external. Which are reaction to the events either internal or external. Emotions are personal experiences. Emotions are personal experiences which arises. Emotions are personal experiences which arises due to complex interplay between physiological, cognitive and situational variables. Physiological, cognitive and situational variables. बस यहां तक हम ऑलरेडी कर चुके हैं. नाउ आई विल टेक अप द डिस्कशन फ्रॉम हियर. राइट डाउन. Earlier it was a myth. Earlier it was a myth that emotions makes us inefficient. Emotions makes us inefficient. Pointers में लिखना. It obstructs our reasoning. It obstructs situational variables होगा मुस्कान. Situational variables. ठीक है. Earlier it was a myth that emotions makes us inefficient, comma, obstructs our reasoning, comma, interferes with sound judgment, interferes with sound judgment, comma, distracts us, comma, leads to arbitrary behavior, comma, undermine planning, management, obstructs the flow of objective data. आप और भी कुछ लिख सकते हो. Obstructs the flow of objective data. etc. However, the researches in recent times have proved beyond doubt, the researches in recent times have proved beyond doubt that emotions helps us first to build trust. Emotions helps us to build trust. Second, to facilitate creative expression. To facilitate creative expression. Third, पहला है to build trust. Second, to facilitate creative expression. Third, to motivate us. Fourth, make us effective. It's a sign of strength, not weakness. It's a sign of strength, not weakness. Helps us arrive at sound judgment. Activates our ethical values. Enhance our reasoning. Etc. See, you need to understand what do you mean by emotions. That is why I say those flowcharts are important, because it helps you to understand in what capacity a topic has to be prepared. Now, we know what are emotions, right? Emotions are a reaction to events, and it is very human to experience emotions. In fact, in past, there was a myth which was existing that if you are emotional, you cannot be rational. If you are emotional, you cannot arrive at sound judgment. If you are emotional, you cannot be efficient. If you are emotional, then you cannot have proper management, proper planning. It will obstruct the flow of objective data. That is all myth which has been proved. It has been said by various researchers in their researches that in fact emotions facilitate good decisions. In fact, emotions facilitate building good work culture. In fact, emotions facilitate good judgments, good reasoning. In fact, it will promote trust in the functioning. But the question arises is that those emotions have to be used with proper reasoning. And here comes into the picture emotional intelligence, which says that you have to reason with your emotions and use emotions in your reasoning. You cannot have any amount of emotion at any which place. You should know what emotions to be used at what place in what capacity. So you should be able to reason with your emotions, that those emotions should not be arbitrary or irrational. At the same time, while you are reasoning, you should use your emotions. Daniel Goleman, who's been referred as father of emotional intelligence, says that at your workplace, 80% of your success is determined by your emotional quotient and not by your intelligent quotient. Is that very clear? Is it making sense? Next, write down. There are different types of emotions. Next point. There are different types of emotions. First, primary and secondary. There are different types of emotions. Either you can categorize it as primary and secondary, and second can be positive emotion or negative emotion. Right? So write down primary and secondary. Primary, direct emotional response to a situation. Direct emotional response to a situation. Direct emotional response to a situation is primary emotion. Is primary emotion. For example, you are sad. For example, you are sad because your friend said some hurtful things. You are sad because your friend said some hurtful things. Next point. Emotional response to primary emotions. Emotional response to primary emotions is known as secondary. Emotional response to primary emotions is known as secondary. For example, because of sadness you experienced, you also became angry. Because of sadness you experienced, you also became angry. So if in a situation your direct emotional response is your primary emotion, and because of that primary emotion, what is being generated is known as secondary emotion. My friend said something very hurtful. I became sad. That's a direct emotional response to a situation. That is my primary emotion. And because I was very sad, it was also generating anger in me. That why did my friend said those things? So that anger is the secondary emotion, right? Next, positive and negative. Positive. Certain emotions are pleasant and rewarding. Certain emotions are pleasant and rewarding. They are known as positive emotions. Certain emotions are pleasant and rewarding. They are known as positive emotions. For example, joy, love, happiness. Etc. Next. However, there are certain feelings which makes us miserable. There are certain feelings which makes us miserable, comma, creates self-doubt, reduce our confidence, create self-doubt, reduce our confidence and self-esteem, reduce our confidence and self-esteem. They are known as negative emotion. For example, hate, anger, jealousy, etc. Hate, anger, jealousy, etc. एक लाइन लिख सकते हो. Sometimes negative emotions also aid in our survival. Sometimes negative emotions also aid in our survival. For example, persistent distress. For example, persistent distress may motivate a person. Persistent distress may motivate a person to seek help or mend a relationship. Persistent distress may motivate a person to seek help and mend or mend a relationship, or mend a relationship, or mend a relationship. Is that clear for everyone? So we have understood what do you mean by emotions. We have understood what are the myth with respect to emotions. We have also understood what are different types of emotions. Then comes the concept of emotional intelligence. If I have to say in simple words, I've already given you the definition. Emotional intelligence refers to the ability to reason with emotions or and use emotions in the reasoning. Emotional intelligence refers to the ability of an individual to reason with emotions and to use emotions in reasoning. That's one definition. The other definition, which is largely being used, is emotional intelligence is referred as an ability to identify, to understand, to use, to manage your own emotions as well as the emotions of others in a positive manner. Is that very clear? And once you are able to identify your emotions, you are able to understand your emotions, you are able to manage your emotions, use your emotions as well as the emotion of others in a positive manner, you will be able to facilitate these things. You will be able to relieve your stress. You will be able to ensure effective communication. You will be able to overcome the challenges. You will be able to empathize with others. You will be able to diffuse or reduce social conflicts. You will be able to decrease antisocial behavior. That is the power and importance of emotional intelligence. ये definition लिखो, फिर हम कल continue करेंगे. Is that very clear? So just write down the concept of emotional intelligence. Right? It is the ability to identify, Nine. I will not be taking up till 4. I will leave the class. I'll repeat the definition. The first definition which I made you write was emotional intelligence refers to the ability of an individual to reason with emotions, and to use emotions in reasoning. That's the first definition. The second definition is on the screen. Emotional intelligence refers to the ability to identify, to understand, to manage, use, सब लिखा है, one's emotions as well as the emotions of others in positive way so as to relieve the stress, communicate effectively, diffuse social conflict, सब कुछ स्क्रीन पर है, decrease antisocial behavior, empathize with others, overcome challenges, etc. इतना लिखा? इतना लिख लो तो बताना. एक और चीज बस लिखवानी है, then I'll wind up. 5 more minutes and then I'll wind up. You've written? Write down. According to Daniel Goleman, he is known as father of emotional intelligence. According to Daniel Goleman, 80% success at work, 80% success at work is due to emotional quotient. 80%, according to Daniel Goleman, known as father of emotional intelligence, according to Daniel Goleman, 80% of success at work is due to emotional quotient, whereas only 20% is due to intelligent quotient, that is IQ. 80% of success at work is due to EQ, and only 20% of success at work is due to IQ. ठीक है? एक लाइन में लिखो. IQ determines the level of intelligence of a person. IQ determines the level of intelligence of a person based on, I'll repeat, IQ determines the level of intelligence of a person based on the knowledge of the world, comma, memory, comma, reasoning, etc. Knowledge of the world, memory, reasoning, etc. Whereas emotional quotient, EQ लिखना, पूरा पूरा मत लिखो, emotional quotient is the measure of, person's level of emotional intelligence. Is the measure of person's level of emotional intelligence. What is emotional intelligence? We have already written the definition. For example, in public services or civil services, for example, in civil services, IQ can help public servant. For example, in civil services, IQ can help public servant in understanding of economic policy. For example, IQ in civil services can help public servant in understanding the technical subjects such as economic policy. However, EQ, that is emotional quotient, can help the public servant to generate consensus, and convince different stakeholders with respect to that economic policy. Generate consensus and convince different stakeholders with respect to the policy. Did you understand the difference between the IQ and EQ? So for an efficient public servant, you need both IQ and EQ. But since the nature of administration is that there is a lot of human interaction, emotional intelligence is of utmost priority. So tomorrow we will take up the discussion from here. I'll discuss Daniel Goleman's perspective, Mayer and Salvi's perspective, role of EI in administration, how EI needs to be developed, and EI in Indian context. That's the agenda for tomorrow's lecture. And next week we'll be left with one more lecture and then we are over with it. Is that very clear for everyone? ठीक है. So the question which I gave, Neha, the question, the difference between social influence and persuasion, वो वाला जो question है, that becomes the assignment question for the day. ठीक है. So take care people, and we'll meet tomorrow and we'll discuss the remaining aspect of emotional intelligence. Bye.